Celeb Savant is a career retrospective type interview focusing on singers, actors, and industry experts. Join Barrett Edelstein now as he dives into the entertainment world.
Katharina Benjamim is a Brazilian filmmaker and producer who is based in Monaco. She works across film, television, and live productions. She has a combined experience on major studio productions with original storytelling that explores psychological themes, cultural identity, and underrepresented perspectives. She began her career in the costume department in London, contributing to major productions such as The Crown, The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. This early experience across film and television helped shape her strong visual sensibility, which now informs her work as a producer and director. Katharina later transitioned in production, developing independent and international projects through her company OCA Productions. Her work includes the LGBTQ+ short film Won't Be Displaced. She also contributed to the documentary Aqueva Doc, and co-directed the psychological horror series Mindscapes. Her current project, the feature documentary No Life in Mars, follows displaced Sudanese individuals rebuilding their lives across multiple countries. Alongside her film work, Katharina has produced international live and hybrid events. Katharina's work is defined by a global perspective, a visually driven approach, and a commitment to meaningful character-focused narratives. Up next on Celeb Savant, we've got Katharina Benjamim. Where in the world are you and how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I am currently in Monaco, so just in the south of France.
Oh, nice. So is that where you live or you're busy working there at the moment?
Yeah, this is where home base has been for the last few years.
Okay, so now let's rewind. At what age, whether as a child or teenager, did you think, okay, I want to be in this movie, this production, this creative world, and how did that journey progress?
That's an interesting question. I think it was definitely something that I had with me since a child. Like my mother is in the fine arts, so I grew up with that influence. And a lot of my friends were creatives or had like parents who were into photography, or they did some sort of art related hobbies or had companies on that. So I think that kind of like shaped my influence into entertainment a little bit. But when I was a teenager, I think around 15, 16 was when it really kicked in for me. I, at the time, was living in the south of England, and I was studying some things like related to art and film. So I started like more and more understanding how the industry worked. And I think as well, like growing up with the influence of ballet and theater, which I did as a child, it helped me have a lot of love and care for this industry as a whole.
So then after studying this world, what were the next steps?
I think naturally, like the next steps are getting into production. So I am in film, but I started a little bit more towards the creative department. So I started in costume, in set design, and I think getting like internships or even doing indie films or school films or gathering with your friends and deciding to do an event or like a podcast or a video for YouTube. All of this is really like the first step for you to try out and understand how you can insert yourself into the industry.
What does it mean to be in the costume department for a movie? What is that process actually? We see the costumes on the screen, but what are those day-to-day tasks that are part of that?
Starting from like the meaning of it is really the beauty and the soul of the film is, in my opinion, what brings everything together visually, because you have the stage, you have the lights, you have the characters, but if you don't have a good costume that makes you relate to that person and makes it believable that that setting could have happened in whatever world that might exist or not, is really that last bit of fantasy that we see that is the glue for everything in the production, really. And as in for today's, it differs a little. Like if you are in development mode where the sketches are being done and fittings are being done, and you're trying colors and you're trying sizes and you're trying silhouettes, or if you're already filming and is more of like a sewing, going on set and looking out for continuity. So it's a little bit of both, but definitely once you hit production is more of a sit down day, like a sewing, relaxing, chatting, have a coffee, unless you're really the costume on set, which is a little bit more hectic.
You referenced the word continuity. How important is that?
Honestly, that is everything. I think in a lot of scenes or sequences in film, it makes or break it, how believable it is. So for those who don't know, the term continuity is when you have something happen in one scene and then you carry that over, whether there is a costume, whether there is lighting, that is a position of the character. So all of that gives us the sense that one thing is carrying over to the other and that the scene is actually real. So I think like is one of the most important things, definitely, because when you look at a film, like let's say a character is hurt and they have like a band-aid on their hand or they have a drop of blood on the t-shirt, and then the scene after they don't, and the scene after that they do. So that creates a disconnect. That's why continuity is so important.
Whoever's involved in that section has to be so concentrated on everything in detail. They've got a very strict job.
Oh my God, yeah.
Now, you also mentioned set design. Let's dive into that a little bit. Tell us more.
So set design is pretty much how you see like the beauty of location, how you create the world. For example, you might have like a country house in a film, but the set design really comes in to give the personality, to give the time in like in history that is set, to give a little bit of the background story of the family that lives there or the person who bought the house and is going to move. So it's the little details. It's kind of like think of you're moving to a home and you want to make it yours. That's what we do. We create that space so it resonates with the character and resonates with the audience to again make that believable. There's that specific character is living there, and we place elements that are coordinated with like this person's character, if that's colors, that's texture, if maybe someone was born on the 1500s, like how does that translate visually? That's really like the job.
I get a sense, though, that a lot of sets are created also because it allows the production team to have more control and flow of the creating of the movie. Because if they're relying specifically on the set outside, there's nature, there's all these lighting, all these different things that they have to contend with. Whereas if they build the set themselves, they're like, okay, we know we've got it for this time. We know we don't have to deal with the rain or whatever, whatever. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yeah, but I would definitely say that it can go like both hands. I think having like an indoors set or a controlled environment, as we say, is definitely easier because just as you mentioned, like you don't have rain, you don't have cloudy sky, you don't have a bird passing by, you don't have the cars on the street. So there are like less work to be done later on in post. And there's also more consistency and is easier. You know that if you need the scene to be at 4 in the morning, you can have the 4 in the morning light for 12 hours in the day.
Yeah.
Whether if you are outside, there's only so much you can do. Like you can play around. Like usually we go shoot overnight, and there are the big light panels that you place towards the sky to make it a little bit more lighter. But again, you only have a fraction of hours that you can do that for that really to work.
What inspires you to say, okay, I want to produce this body of work? What is your inspirations around your projects?
I think for me it's more about the story behind the project rather than an inspiration itself. So a lot of the things I do, they are socially relevant, culturally relevant. They focus on minorities. They tell untold stories. So I think it's really about giving visibility to characters and stories that wouldn't really be that commercial. And a lot of that is because growing up back home in Brazil and then moving to Europe, where I've been for the last like 12 years, representation, it's something that is still lacking. So I think that for us, they're mainly like immigrants. It's our responsibility in the industry to fill in that gap, to make sure that we're being represented, that other people like us, they are able to see themselves on screen. And as well, that I think on the wave of entertainment right now, where most of the times content is really shallow, um, we are giving that space and the voice to create intricate stories that actually have a message behind it, whether that message is resilience, if that message is the cultural relevance, if it is a historical message, if that is a humanitarian message. So I think those are really the points that for me are important, because coming into this industry quite early, around like age of like 18, 19, when I started university, and having the chance to intern at work at Disney, Netflix, I saw grand productions that were brilliant, some very cultural and historical relevant, but I also saw the flip side of that. And I was interested in that. I was like, okay, this is not my place. My place is really to help get the word out about the things that I believe are important for society to understand, and maybe perhaps to be shown in a different light.
So you create documentaries and story films, correct?
Yeah, both docs and narrative.
What is the different approach between creating those two?
I love the question. I think they are worlds apart. So let's think about scripted content or narrative content, which is the stories that we create, they are not real. So if we're telling a fantasy story, we have all the freedom to create whatever make believe world we want to design. And as long as the world and the characters make sense on that environment, the story will be solid and will be coherent. So you have like a lot of freedom, whether that is later on in locations, if that is on the creative department, if that comes across on directing styles, like you have a lot of that creative aspect, which I think is one of the reasons why a lot of the creatives decide to go into film, because you have all the possibilities, and a lot of the times you have the big budgets that allow you to create those things that you want to create. And I think when you look into doc, like starting from a budget perspective is a lot less, so it's limited what you can do. But as well, you need a lot less resources, right? Because you will be based on interviews or people telling the stories or voiceovers or historical content, if that is a stock footage, if that is the news. You do have less freedom in terms of creating a storyline or creating a story itself, but you do have all the freedom, and if I may say, the responsibility to tell a story in a way that is true to the events that happened, and that is also engaging for the audience, because no one wants to sit down for an hour and a half and watch something that is low paced or boring. You want to be captivated. You want that feel that when you watch a film, you relate to the character, you involved on the story, but you still have to make sure that what you're telling is true.
Okay, so hearing the differences, and this is a perception that I am, which you may agree with, or you may say, no. Would a sort of a fictional story that you're creating be a little bit more challenging because you've got an empty space to start with? You've got an empty canvas and you're creating everything from scratch and you have to think of all those different things. Whereas with the documentary, you sort of already got an outline. Or is my perception completely incorrect?
No, it is right. I think that goes from person to person, from team to team. For me, particularly creating something from scratch, it's a way easier because that's what I learned at first, right? This was always my inclination, was curating like fairy tale stories, sci-fi stories. That's what I went to study. That's what my first jobs were at. And I'm a very creative person, and my team is very creative and very collaborative as well. So we always like come down with pen and paper with the writers, and we create these characters. They're completely like out of this world, make believe. But the thing is, deep down, the core of these characters very often are influenced by people we know or by ourselves, by our own stories. So you're not really creating from scratch, although it seems that way. There's always like real inspiration there.
What does it mean to be a producer on a film or a documentary? What are those day-to-day tasks? Why are you laughing? Because we hear this title of producer. And we're like, okay, cool, that's exciting. But what does it actually mean?
Right. I think that is the $1 million questions, because I think for everyone who is outside of the industry, it's completely almost impossible to understand what we do because you have so many different types of producers and you have so many people in the production team. And sometimes even within the industry is a little loose, the term who gets the credit. Why? Producing can be all sorts of things, from helping develop the idea, keeping the creative eye as perhaps a creative producer or a development producer who will work most closely with the creators and the writers. Or you have the lead producers or the main producers who will be in charge of budgeting, of contracts, of hiring people, of firing people, making sure that all the legislations apply, that you get the permits, that you do like all the boring admin back end. That's the daily tasks. And when we are on set, for example, to make sure that you have amicable space and environment where everyone can work, and everyone can do their best, that all the gear you need is there, that you're not going to have any problems with the cops swinging by and telling you that you need to stop filming because you didn't get the right permit, or if you have someone getting an accident on set, you thought of having someone who is first aid that can help the person. So it's all those little things that really makes the crew feel safe, and it makes and sets the ground and the foundation for the film to be able to happen. I do like to say that being a producer for me is like being the mom of the crew and the mom of the film, because there is a thin line. Sometimes we're the dad, sometimes we're the mom. But it's kind of like that nourishing parenting, but also holding people accountable. But as I said, the most maybe important and recurrent tasks are the admin, because that is really like what we're brought in to do. And that also includes building the team, right? Like choosing the right director. We're kind of oversee everything, and we're always the last word. So if there is something to be disagreed, if there is something to be decided, if that is not purely creative, it has to go through us because we're the people to greenlit the production.
So you reference about creating an amicable, nice space for everyone to work in. Without pointing any labels or anything, often people in the industry have sort of egos related to success or previous things that have happened. How do you, in your experience, deal with egos?
I think that's such a boom, because it is a little bit of the stereotype, but it's 100% true. Everyone on this industry, including me, have an ego, and I think it's a healthy thing. I think to be in entertainment, you need to have partially an ego, but you do have to be equally humbled. Although those two things seem that they go against each other, they really don't. Because I think having an ego and understanding what you're good at and the things you've done and how far you've come, and like standing your ground as a producer, as a director, as an actor, like whatever role you might be taking, is important for people to respect you. And it's also important for you to kind of have like a word that is respected and that people know that you will hold that promise, because we do work a lot with like promises. And you also have the thing line where the ego is just you being arrogant or you thinking that you're better than other people, which is a stereotype. I don't refer as ego only as a negative thing that people in this industry have to have, but I think what balances it out is really how humble you're able to be. Because if you're dealing with a star, and most of the times the biggest stars, they are the sweetest people, but if you deal with someone who's kind of like getting into that space, is where most of the ego situation happens. So you really need to be humble and like understand, like, okay, it's not personal, it's not with me, let this person behave this way. And I personally always believe that when you treat people who are being aggressive or bluntly rude or just mistreating colleagues, and when you hold them accountable with kindness and with respect, you kind of break the barrier, because they're expecting you to come like lashing out on them. Mainly as a producer, they are waiting for you to come and be like, hey, you're going to be excused from the production today. We're going to get someone else to come in your place. Like, this is how much of an impact you've done. If you do this again, we're going to have to dismiss you. But if you come to them and you're like, hey, bud, like, what's going on that you're acting this way? What did that person do to you? You kind of like break that cycle. So I think this is really, at least for me, where being humble and being as well emotionally aware comes into play.
Tell us about your latest project that's just been released and what was the inspiration behind it.
So we have, I say we because it's never only myself, it's me and the whole team that works with me in whatever productions that might be. We have a few projects that are coming out. So we have Won't Be Displaced, which is a refugee story, is a queer story about a Nigerian refugee that comes into the UK and seeks refuge. She meets this wonderful, bubbly singer-songwriter Alice, who takes her into their home, and is a story that shows another light to the queer community. We talk about friendship, we talk about resilience, we talk about two women that, despite their displacements, whether that is moving into a different country or their families like kicking them out of the house because of the sexuality, they come in together and they make themselves stronger. I do think that this project is especially special for me and the team, because it's not only about representation, but it also shows the queer community in a way that is not the always what is presented at festivals, for example. Like, it's not a love story. We're running away of the love stories. We want to see more than that. Queer people are not just two women loving each other or two men loving each other. Is not what that is. We're people. Like, there are so many layers that we wanted to show. So I think that project was super, super important because of those different aspects. We also have now a documentary soon to be sent into festivals. The name is No Life on Mars. Is also a refugee story. It is a documentary, similar but different than the last one. Is a humanitarian documentary done in collaboration with foundations and NGOs, and it follows 5 refugees. They are rebuilding their lives after the current conflict that erupted in Sudan. So again, it's a very important story to be told. And I came to this project as a creative producer a little bit towards the end to help reframe the way the story was being told and making the story more elevated and stronger in order to be presented and have a bigger impact. I think what stood out for me was why nobody was talking about this war, why nobody was talking about preserving the life that we have here instead of looking for life elsewhere. Because I think as humans, we get very interested with what might be out there in the universe. And sometimes we forget that we should be really looking to preserve what we already have here. So I think that is a timeless story, really, and is very humbling and eye-opening to see how much distress our work can cause. I know that seems like obvious, but you really don't measure the impact until you hear from someone who's been in that position. So I think it was super enlightening, as a human being to be part of that project.
You referenced earlier festivals. How important is festivals within the industry?
Oh my God, they are everything. I think now we are starting to live in a time where the industry is changing again. The industry has been the same for a very long time. And now we're seeing AI, we're seeing big studios wanting to buy other big studios. And that is expected to have a huge impact. But for me and my fellows who are independent filmmakers, festivals are really the way of getting the word out there. It's how we get industry credibility. It's how we get people to notice what we're doing. It's how we make other connections. It's how we get like leverage to the stories that we're telling. So it's definitely like an essential step for anyone who wants to grow in this industry.
You reference about other movie studios buying studios and the impact of that. How do you feel that the industry will be affected by it?
Prices would definitely go up of everything, whether that's subscriptions, whether that is labor. The studios will dismiss a lot of people because you no longer need so many folks to work in one thing when you kind of like create a conglomerate. And I think not fear, but because that's definitely not a feeling I want anyone in the industry to nourish right now. If anything, need to be a little bit more courageous. But I am a little worried about the quality of the stories that will start coming out and the positioning of the narratives. And if there will be censorship, if there won't be, like, again, coming from a Latin American country where we do have a story of censorship in media in the 80s, which when you think about it was yesterday. This is something crazy to think about it, that you have the biggest studios trying to merge and you're like, okay, so if such and such sit on the board, if such and such are the people leading these companies, what are the stories that we're going to have going out of it? How much diversity are we going to have? How many different opinions are we going to have? The whole point of the media and the entertainment industry, it's to not only create stories that people can relate to, but it's to shine the light in what matters the most and to show different ways of thinking, different ways of living. We understand that as filmmakers, we might not be able to change the world or change the way people understand certain events, but it's definitely our duty to show that there is a flip side of everything, and film or even like interviews or news channels, like going a little bit broader into the whole entertainment, like TV and whatnot, that really, when you think about it, is how it shapes the way we view ourselves, the way we perceive ourselves, we perceive our country, we perceive society. It's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way, because you do have that control, but you also are being controlled by the people that are in the higher places. And I think it will become harder and harder to tell stories that are not completely aligned with what they want to be told.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's a big sigh of like, wait. So Katharina, the podcast is listened to throughout the world. As a final message, what would you like to say?
I would love to encourage everyone who might have thought one day to come into this industry to really give it a try, give it a shot. I know sometimes it seems like something very, very distant, but if you have resilience and if you're a good person, this industry will really like come and like make you part of it. It's not an easy environment to work in. And I think this is also why we need more and more people who hold themselves accountable and have a head over their shoulders, to come and do like a positive impact and make a positive impact on the industry. But I think perhaps the biggest message for those who really are not interested in being part of the industry, which is completely fine, you know. Imagine if everyone wanted to be in entertainment. But as next time you watch a film or you consume a piece of content, don't be on the autopilot. Like put your phone down, be present, watch, listen to what is being told, watch the story, look at the landscapes, look at the narrative, like listen to the music. Everything that was put in there is for a reason and is purposefully to make you think or to make you feel something. And I think the most important outcome of consuming content is when we see people talking about it. If that is having an argument, if that's having a conversation, if that is having an epiphany, if that is going on Google it and research whatever it is that you watch, I think this is really where the beauty of the industry is. So yeah, I think it's just like a broad invitation for everyone to put their phones down.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Celeb Savant. Please follow Barrett on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at Celeb Savant. That's CelebSavant.